Okay, welcome to those already joined. This is improving webinar. We're going to wait just for a few minutes for people to join, and then we can start with the presentation we have prepared for today. We have more people joining.
Excellent.
Just a few seconds, and then we can get this rolling. Okay, I think we can get this started. Okay. Welcome again to those who joined. This is another improving webinar, part of the series where our improvers share their knowledge. During the presentation, you have questions. You can ask via the Q&A feature, and we'll pass them on to the speaker. Today, Daniel Schaufler is one of our principal consultants who has experience in e-commerce, telemedicine, oil and gas. He is an electrical engineer turned into software developer. He prides himself on highly disciplined development, leading to more effective products and processes. He's a problem solver at heart and leverages his strength in applying industrial theory to challenges of software development. Among the key challenges facing development is the communication gap. So Daniel has taken to blogging, public speaking, and consulting to help bridge the gap and demystify the technology our world depends on. When not engaged in tackling the gap or coding, you find Daniel playing with his children, reading, or tinkering with her in the woodshop or in a computer. Today, Daniel will walk us past the aha moment and guide us while we take our first steps into the fascinating, fast, and sometimes overwhelming new world of GenAI with his presentation from Skeptic to Pro, Building Trust in AI. So without any further ado, Daniel, take it away.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Hello all, and welcome to, as he said, From Skeptic to Pro, Building Trust in AI. The goal behind this talk is to take you from where a lot of us may be starting with AI saying, yeah, I'm not 100% behind this tool. It takes me a little while to really even use it. Is it really that good? Towards the path that will lead to mastery of use in a professional setting. Now, a little bit about me. I am, of course, Daniel Schaufler, husband, father of 5, and yes, I do find time to both blog, develop public talks, and even figure out GenAI, even with those commitments I already have. And it comes out of this. I am aiming to lead software engineering excellently. So a lot of what you'll find in this talk won't just be, well, how do I actually use this tool? We're not doing tutorials today, but we are going to be talking about the processes, about the things you can do with the tool, and the prompts, the warnings, the guidelines, the rules of thumb, if you will, that you'll need to keep in mind so that you can make great and effective use of the powerful new tools now available to us. But before we get too far into that, I want to go back to one thing that Sergio mentioned up at the top. If you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A section. This talk is designed with space in mind to allow for some of that discussion that should naturally be coming up, because AI is a very rapidly moving topic, which means sometimes the things that I may be preparing to talk about will have changed, and your particular situation will have unique wrinkles. So feel free to throw those into the chat and ask. I'm happy to help to the best of my ability. But let's start with where we kind of find ourselves today, the AI takeover. Or, well, not really, but it certainly feels like that. We get a new model almost every single quarter at most. Like, it's releasing faster than that, and they keep talking about all these magic benchmarks that they're doing better than their competitors on. And it feels like we're getting even more and more magical thinking that, well, since you can run an AI, you can just spit out code and we won't need software developers in 10 years. Yeah, right. Now, I'm not just saying that because I'm a software developer. but because the market has already demonstrated that there are patterns which require actual knowledge for tool use. But we're the tool users. We software engineers, we developers of code are still needed, but the capacity we're needed in has changed. And so we are now being pressed to make use of these AI tools in an effective manner. It's like being told we have to pick up an entirely new set of tools. Imagine the carpenter who first had to go and figure out how to make use of power tools, which would have been pneumatics or electric. That's completely different than how you'd use a regular saw. And of course, initially, they're going to trust their saw better because they have better control. They know how to use it. They know the situations to make it perform in the way they intend. Today, you can do the same thing with power tools. It's all down to experience. Whether you're using a table saw to cut that miter joint, or you're just trying to straight out an edge. It comes down to understanding and trusting the tool will behave in a predictable fashion. For us in software, we've already developed this with the magic that would have been a code language. Speak to it in this fashion, and it will start behaving that way. We're going to have to develop a very similar sense now for how AI behaves, and that's going to be the shift. We need to develop the practice enough to understand and predict in advance how the AI will behave in order to be able to trust it, to make effective use of it as a tool. Now, I want to put into context another thing. We're not just in the "hang in there, guys" statement. See the motivational poster there. There's actually a lot more hope for us than you might imagine. But to provide that, I want to draw attention to two job roles, which kind of show us the history of this. Way back when personal computers were becoming much more popular, much more widely available, and were being available in the office, there was for a brief period a role, a job known as computer operator, which rapidly vanished within about 2 or 3 years because it just became an expectation that everyone's job was to, frankly, operate a computer. Because the tools available for word processing, for, frankly, accounting, were so much more powerful when the human who knew how to do these things was given a computer, that it benefited society and everyone working to simply learn how to use the new tool. It'd be like saying to a 5-year-old now, yeah, you don't need to learn how to use a calculator. Why would we not? Of course we want them to understand the basics of mathematics, but we want them skilled in making use of the tool because they will be able to do more with the use of the calculator when it comes time. Similarly, we've seen that same role already emerge for AI. It was called prompt engineer. I don't know if you guys remember, but it's gone now, mostly. Certainly there might be some pockets here and there, but for about 2 or 3 years there, back, shortly after COVID, there was this thing called prompt engineer running around. It's going to go the same way that the computer operator did, because it will become part of the default tool set that everyone uses. Most of us nowadays don't think about including Visual Studio as part of the tool set we use if we also declare we've worked in .NET, because that's the tool. Why would I talk about special experience in that if I'm telling you I've developed in .NET? Of course I used that tool. In the same way, these GenAI tools that are becoming available, not just ChatGPT, but things like Claude or Windsurf or Cursor, these agentic IDEs, are going to become the same kind of thing, where it will no longer be a special sauce on your resume that you have experience with these. It will just become expected if you've done software development. So, for the purpose of today's talk, let's play pretend. Let's pretend you got an email a little bit like that one. Hey guys, corporate decided to roll out Copilot for everyone. Please follow these steps to get it set up on your computer, and good luck. They're watching how much you're using it. I wish I could say I was joking, but I received an email akin to this, but within the last 6 months. Basically just dropping this new tool on a dev team that had the basic training of what is this thing and how do I make certain I don't accidentally leak corporate secrets. That was it. No training on how do I use this well. No training on don't feed it this stuff except for the PII kind of information. Nothing. No statement on this is how your work process should change. And so a lot of the developers at the time didn't really make a lot of heavy use of it. They kind of just were like, well, it's faster for me to do it myself, so I'll keep doing that. Because the expectations didn't change. Corporate still expected them to perform at their top performance, not to pull back to learn to do better in the future. They didn't care about building capacity. They only wanted productivity right now, dang it. And so if you're finding yourself in that, I want to paint a journey that you could be taking, which mirrors a lot of the journey I had to take as soon as I had that email come in from my client saying, you got to use this thing, you got to use it now. So here's roughly where I see us going, right? There are 3 broad milestones. We'll start with where I found myself and where a lot of my team found ourselves when we got that email of corporate sending out Copilot. It was just smarter Intellisense. Here, provide a comment. It'll predict the code you want. Maybe it'll be good. Which then turns into simple prompting. If you've had any experience trying to get ChatGPT or the other models to produce a code file for you or a script, this is kind of the zone you're already playing in. And to advance out of this zone towards the future I think we have with agentic IDEs, I want to raise 2 things you already know, 2 mile markers, garbage in, garbage out, and focus. And then leave us pointed at collaborating with this AI tool, in a sense, for more complex tasks, the true future that I think we can get to with agentic IDEs if we choose to take the time to master this new capability. Now, we're going to start with a very simple reference. This is the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, adjust, or adapt in this case. This is the basic cycle you'll be familiar with in just about every action. TDD fits this cycle. Agile fits this cycle. We borrowed it from learnings from lean manufacturing. And it is essentially how you're doing your work today, even if you don't always recognize it. You're handed a user story or some requirements. In your head, you're starting to plan how you'd implement this. A lot of us jump immediately into implementing to try and figure out the code as we figure it out. We don't start with a design. We start with a sense of what we need to do, and we start trying to write the code to do that and refactor our way into a design. Not ideal, but I've seen it work. And then we go to check it, which can either be automated unit testing and then quick cycles with adjustments and doing, or long cycles with integration testing or sending it over to QA to check it and then make adaptations to anything that changes, and then form new plans based upon the requirements which remain and what the program can do right now. So the most basic way I've seen people making use of AI is to essentially bolt it on. I don't really know what this thing's going to do. I'm going to just say it's there. Cool. So now my IDE has Copilot integrated. Let it do its magic. Which usually results in the developer being fairly passive, waiting for the prompt to tell them what it can do. Or, hey, would you like me to refactor that? Bring back the days with the friendly little paperclip trying to suggest things. Ugh. But these passive interactions tend to have low returns. They're things like, hey, write a comment about what code you want it to write, and it'll predict something for you. Or maybe in some of the cursors like, hey, hit this special command, and we'll try and fix the code that's obviously broken to you. Just tell us what it is. Not great, not high value, but safe. It doesn't ruin your whole code base by completely rewriting everything. It doesn't accidentally shutter your business because you gave it too much control. Safe. Low returns. But it does have a value. So if you're there today, don't regret the day of small beginnings. You see, the value in this is the learning of what AI can start providing. It's teasers. This happened for me while I was trying to write an aspect or an attribute that I wanted to apply to a bunch of REST APIs. I wanted to decorate the controller endpoints to log page view behavior for given business lines. But I needed to pull that data out of something that was in one of the injected services to know what product line I was on. Well, I left a comment for myself saying I need to do this, and lo and behold, without thinking about it, the AI proposed, well, you know you can get that from the HTTP context, right? No, I didn't. Show me. And it spits out a line of code. My check for this was to run the code against a local version of the running REST API and the running web page, and look, it worked. I didn't think to use AI in this way. I just wrote a comment to myself to pseudocode this thing out later. But it worked. I didn't go and try and use AI at first, but I still got value from it. And if it didn't work, I would have just thrown it out and gone to do it myself after some research. The AI saved me time by jumping ahead to be extra helpful. So you can get value from this, but it is bare cents on the dollars of value you could get out of this if you learn to lean in. And this event is what kicked me off to trying to figure out, how do I get better with this thing? How do I get more of that value? Not just the, let me comment it out and hope it can figure out what I meant, but how do I have it start writing more of the code so I can do more of the brain work? How do I start having it do a lot of the grunt work that is not great to have a senior developer doing, but would totally make sense to hand to a junior to build their skills? And what I landed on were these. I had to intentionally practice. Just like when I was learning programming languages, I had to take what I was learning in school or from the book and actually do the exercise. Because it wasn't until doing the exercise that I actually understood what it was trying to do. In the same way, I had to start trying to use AI, and it took the form of try AI first, which forced me into patterns that eventually built better skills. I already knew what I wanted to do, so I knew I was going to take a time hit to do this. I made plans and adjusted for it so that I could intentionally practice as I built using AI to do certain work, especially the stuff that was obviously really, really repetitive. And that then transitions us into the next section. But I want to take a pause here and ask Sergio, do we have any questions coming in yet?
Yeah, we definitely have a question too, actually. Let me see one. The first one goes, why should I be learning this new tool? It takes longer for me to prompt an AI to get it right than it will just to write the code.
Fair. So the question is, why should I bother learning this thing? It's just going to take me longer, and I could do it better the first time myself. True. The answer comes down to a long-term concern versus a short-term concern. And this is a real challenge for developers who are set on projects with tight timelines and they don't already have the capacity built in to learn. In those circumstances, yeah, it's a hard ask to say, yeah, you should go spend some time learning AI. I get it. I've been there. Those are no fun. We call them death marches for a reason. However, if you never slow down enough to create new capacity, you are stuck running at the speed you are running today forever, and it won't be fast enough in the future. There are developers who have learned enough of the generative AI use to get 10x the returns for their thought work, that is 10 times the productive running in production code, out of the same design work that they were already going to have to do. That's the key difference. Why should you learn to do this thing? Because in learning to describe the designs and intent you have in your mind to the AI, you remove the piece that the business frankly doesn't care about. The business is not paying you to write code. They want the behavior from the machine. And if they could do so without code, they do that, which is why they're, by the way, asking us to write it with AI. Our job is and remains as translators from a human intent to a sequence of behaviors that could accomplish it. Why should you learn AI? So that you can do the translating job, the high value stuff from your work, more, and the low value stuff of write the code, less. Now, that is a hard and bitter pill to swallow. I believe it. I'm right there with you. I loved when I was a mid-level and junior solving the tough programming challenges. I've gotten into the weeds in writing reflection and expression tree work in C#. That's wonderful and heady and complex. But it wasn't valuable, at least not the most valuable to my clients. Software development is a really, really expensive solution to problems. Just to get you a sense of that, a 5-person team running at about $100 an hour for a year will easily cost your company $1 million for whatever you can produce. $1 million for 1 year of 5 people's efforts that we hope produces working software to the ends that the company wanted to buy. Why wouldn't the company then be asking you, instead of trying to build this house with regular saws and hammers, Why wouldn't they ask you to use power tools and backhoes and any other technique they can get you so you can build more houses, the things that are valuable, in the same amount of time? The bitter reality is you're offering your services for time. Yes, we enjoy the writing of code, and there will still be a place and room for artisans in this regard. But understand what you're offering and what's of value for what you want. Learning to use the AI tool allows you to produce more of the value, making you a more valuable partner for your business. Sergio, you mentioned there was a second question.
Yeah, really interesting answer. Yeah, we have two more. What are your thoughts about vibe coding?
All right, so I'll straight up answer this. I hate that name. I loathe it deeply, but I also get why we call it that. Vibe coding, with the following definition, is something I staunchly oppose. If by vibe coding you mean I'm going to just prompt the AI and accept whatever it gives me and try and run that and hope, essentially vibe coding plus hope, that's not a method. There are already examples, terrifyingly so, of non-coders who have vibe coded and stood up a SaaS, a service as service, offering that they were going to accept real money for. The moment the guy announced it on Twitter, within 24 hours, it had been brought to its knees through known security vulnerabilities that the poor guy did not understand and couldn't fix. That's the weakness that vibe coding puts us in. Now, is it a massively powerful enablement of people who can't already do code? Hell yes, and I'm excited for the accelerator that represents. But if we just vibe it out, we are dooming ourselves to all the mistakes we have already discovered in the previous 30 years of technology. Let's please not do that.
Thank you. And we have one more for the time in. What do you mean trust AI? Wouldn't that be like asking John Connor to trust Skynet? A good reference.
Love the reference. Yes, I definitely understand how this is like asking John Connor to trust Skynet. I suggest, however, it's more like asking young John Connor to trust the Terminator that was sent back to protect him. You'll recognize in that movie, he very quickly recognizes the behavior which is going to kill him versus the one that's going to keep him safe, and argues for the one that keeps him safe. It's all kind of an interesting movie there, but leaving movie trivia aside, I do actually mean to trust the AI. But not like you trust a person, right? Let's be very clear, AI has not yet reached personhood. Could it be possible in the future? Maybe. But what you're dealing with right now is, in effect, a super advanced math equation. We'll get into this a little bit later, but it's about being able to predict the future behavior of, right? When you say you trust so-and-so, what you're really saying is, I can count on them to blah. I am willing to take the risk that's implied with being wrong about this because, and most of the time when we answer that, it's because the person has done that kind of thing in the past, right? Why do I trust my brother? Because he's my brother and I have experience with him over decades of how do we work well together. So when I ask him to help me with X and he says I can do that, I trust him. In the same way, we need to develop trust in the AI tooling as a tool. Just like you wouldn't want to, trust a simple 2x4 over a massive chasm, because is it really going to hold your weight? I don't know. I've never tested it. But you'd trust the same chasm if you were crossing it over a steel and concrete bridge. You need to figure out what it takes for you to trust AI to get you from here to there. Can you trust it to safely get you there? What patterns indicate it's not going to be safe? What things like rust underneath the girders indicate that repairs are needed or caution is needed? That's what we're talking about when we say trust AI. Not trust like a person, but trust that the tool will behave in a predictable fashion and will get you results that you value. Great question. Thank you, and love the reference.
Yeah, awesome. Those are the questions we have so far, so you can move on to the next section.
Thank you, Sergio. Very much appreciated. So next section, as I had kind of alluded to, is this simple prompting area, where we have just stepped away from, well, the AI suggested it could help by doing this, to now, well, I want to see if I can get more out of it. So we're going to talk about holding your AI's hand. And the most common way people think this means is, oh, I'm going to take that PDAC, blah, the plan, do, check, adjust cycle, and I'm going to just have part of the work that just automatically goes to AI, and then I check and see if it works. And there's some value in that, but a lot of vibe coding failures happen because of that, where I'm just going to hand off the work that the human can't do to the AI and hope. Remember that guy who announced his new SaaS offering on Twitter and 24 hours later found it had come to its knees? That's where we run into here. You can't afford just to hand it off to the AI and expect that will be enough if you don't have the specialist training to be able to check the output that it's producing. So rather than have it be this tool that handles something the human couldn't at all, I think a more scalable pattern looks like this, where the human is always involved in using the AI to do the action. Where the human does some, then the AI fills in a part, and the human can see that and adjust and adapt, and the two work in harmony. For me, this is where we get more into an analogy akin to power tools, right? This is where the developer goes from, I know how to do this, and I have a working example, go make me 3 more, comes into effect. My favorite example of this was when I realized I could use an example of a conversion of one test file into a different format, and then tell the AI, refactor this other file using this one as an example. I did this for a upgrade to move from Jest to VTest, and I would just tell it, hey, here's how it works in Jest. Here's the version I converted to VTest. Update this Jest version to match the standards you saw in the VTest version. Straightforward. Offer an example and run. Sergio?
Yes, we have a couple questions.
Go for it.
How can I tell when I'm given a complicated prompt versus a simple one?
So this being on my simple prompting. Complicated prompt versus simple prompt. This is actually going to be one of the more difficult, more nuanced topics for humans. Very often when I say refactor, right, that involves a lot of things. It could involve restructuring the file, splitting the file out, renaming methods, reorganizing methods. And so the moment I'm giving it a prompt like that, how do I know it's a simple or a complicated one? I hate to tell you this, but the answer is going to be guess and check. You will need to get the experience of sensing how you're phrasing a prompt to the AI to know, hold on, that needs to be split into multiple steps, multiple prompts, versus not. And that will depend largely on your model and on your context. In the context, I found that the simple prompt of, here's a working example, refactor this to match that, was enough for it to read the code with, I was using the Copilot model at the time to do this. And this was maybe 2-3 months ago. If I had tried to do the same thing with a different model, the prompt might not have worked. But the model understood code, and so I could trust it to read and interpret, in this case, the TypeScript code that I was refactoring. But if I tried to do the same thing and say, hey, refactor this class, extract these methods to be common, and also, you notice I started 3 or 4 steps? If I find myself doing that, I've given it a complicated prompt that it's not going to be able to handle, because it will lose continuity of what I was supposed to do and in what order. There are ways around that. We'll get into those for rule of thumb towards the end. But I would use that as a starting point, right? If I have to say blank and blank and blank, I'm probably giving it a complex prompt. Start with 1 step at a time. Sergio?
Yeah, we have one more that just came in. It says, what are some of common errors people can run into with simple prompting? Are there any rules of thumb we should keep in mind?
Yes. All right. So I'm going to use the slides coming up here to explain some of the common errors, right? So while we've got this analogy of power tools going on, let's remember that even with the most powerful tools, human beings tend to smash their thumb every once in a while. And so the biggest deal we have to watch for is to make certain we are not simply manufacturing foot guns faster. How do you know you're not manufacturing a foot gun? Well, try it out. You'll find out if it was a foot gun when you attempt to make use of it. So make certain you're reading the results of your AI prompt. Or Tell it not to write the changes yet, but to tell you how it would plan to do it first. These, as rules of thumb, are a good way to essentially do a dry run and to check the logic and the thinking, if you've got a thinking model, a reasoning model, I'm sorry, of the model you're using. This will allow you to get a good sense of what is the model capable of and how would it interpret what you just told it without it changing the code. This allows you to tease it apart so you can see and learn faster and avoid some of the complications that come from it changing your code in unintended ways. We'll get to some additional rules of thumb that help you with that as we get to the agentic workflows. But
We have a couple more questions. So when you have a moment.
Go for it.
One of them goes, do you see a value in asking models to create their own prompts? Like, how would you ask yourself to refactor this class into this new style?
So answer is broadly yes and no. I do see value in asking the model to help me refine a prompt. In fact, one of my favorite techniques, this being another rule of thumb, heads up, is to give the model the instruction to ask for clarifying questions when the instructions are unclear. This is probably my favorite technique because I have learned how poorly a lot of my early prompts went because I had it ask clarifying questions. And using that, I was able to answer those questions ahead of time the next time. 2, it is useful to ask the model to help refine an existing prompt, but very difficult if you just ask it a broad, create a prompt, blah, unless you know the things you're worried about. For example, valuable would be asking, help me to create a prompt for another agent to implement this, keeping these constraints in mind. If you can describe this in a meaningful, clear, detailed fashion. But not as useful is, I need a prompt for blah, help me out. Okay, what's keeping you from just writing a refactor blah and then testing it? I prefer the testing approach because it gets you the feedback of what's the AI actually going to do with what you said. The most important piece in learning to leverage AI and not create foot guns is to actually output something that's testable. I don't mean output testable code. I mean output the prompt from your brain and create. That act of creation of the prompt is the thing that needs to be refined to make better use of AI. And yes, it sounds super meta, and that meta property is going to define a lot of the new behaviors you need to adapt as we go through with this. But if you can keep yourself in the driver's seat, keep you in the position of creating the prompt, you will get the benefit out of it. If you kind of hand off of that to have the AI creating the prompt for you, you're not practicing the key skills you'll need to develop to use it really, really well. Great question, by the way. Sergio, any others?
So we have one more from Eduardo. What is the best what is the best way to actually start incorporating AI into my workflow?
Excellent. All right. So how do I start incorporating AI into my workflow? I'm so glad you asked. Let's start with, do you know what your workflow is? As I kind of mentioned, I'm going to jump back a couple of slides here. The recommended pattern at this stage is this one, where you're going to trust the AI to do some clever things, but you need to verify its outputs and use it yourself. You're asking, where do I do that here? So here's some of what I am doing when I have pieces of the work I know I need to work on, but I can't give it to an agentic IDE yet. So example being like that refactor step. I know I need to refactor this. That's going to take a bit, but if I can describe the kind of refactor I want, especially if it's en masse to a bunch of these things during an upgrade, then describe it once, run it again is a great place to use AI, because now I'm not spending the 15 minutes writing it myself. I'm spending the 3 minutes the prompt takes to actually run, and then I can check it. That's one spot. The next spot, I can use it to be a more effective context awareness. I need to blah. Where else in the code base have I blah? Rather than me Control-Shift finding the same pattern or checking all the usages of such and such, I ask the AI, reference the pages, summarize how it's used. Useful. I'm using it to more quickly crawl through page content. Again, another place to do so, more towards the design side. One other example. if I've gotten a user story and I know the test context, the given when thens that I would want to send it as test cases, I can ask it, hey, take these test cases and this example of a test file set up how I like to set them up. Go create the test class that will test a method in the future with this signature. Also great. Now it's generated my test cases. I can look at them. Good. And then I can start prompting it one step at a time. This is where the human is still acting as supervisor rather than the agent, which can go and start doing these steps itself. But anywhere you find I'm going to start putting hands to keyboard to start writing changes to files or start reading a bunch of files is a good moment to flag I might be able to use AI for this. And even if the first attempt doesn't work, try it. If it doesn't work, either refine your query or go do it manually yourself. You spent 30 seconds and you've learned a lot, either because the AI produced a useful summary or because you realize that prompt didn't work and you need to think about it again. Sometimes it's because your thinking wasn't clear yet. We'll get some ways to refine that as well. But the best way is to get started and to try it out. If you're going to interact with files that the AI would have access to, ask it for summaries of, hey, where is this done? What is the common pattern for it? Hey, can you find me the files that use this and what their patterns are? Or what methods would have to change if this method signature went from A to B? Investigation. To generate pieces of your code. Hey, what should the test cases look like for this? Or I just thought of a new test case. Write the test code for this using the stuff already in this file. That's how I was making very heavy use of Copilot when I couldn't use it in the full agentic mode to write the class for me. I would have it produce the script, I'd copy and paste it in, and I'd make adjustments to make it fit. So hopefully that answers that question of how do I get started integrating it into my workflow. And we're going to point you now how to use those same practices to create the use in the agentic IDEs. Great question. Now, as we've been talking about this, right, we got power tools. We got to make certain we're not going to smash our fingers and create foot guns faster. Here's where we are right now. And I want to bring you back to some mile markers you're likely already familiar with as a software developer, having done this for a while. Namely, garbage in, garbage out, or GIGO, and focus. For GIGO, I want you to remember that AI is still just a computer, right? You guys already remember how it is to deal with this problem. Poor user requirements, anyone? Right? If you give it poor instructions, it doesn't understand. The only difference is that you're now speaking in English rather than in some other C# fuzzy, non-fuzzy dialect. English is a little weird. It can refer to things using pronouns rather than pointers. It can also overload those pronouns to mean something else entirely, and it could have fundamentally changed the context of what that means. So you have a computer. What is it doing? It is a gigantic statistical math equation. It is trying to maximize a score for the predicted response you asked for. I find mental model-wise, it is easiest to think of the LLM, the large language model, as a gigantic network graph. And by feeding it a prompt, you are pushing it into a specific zone in that graph, and it will try and generate from the tokens, the words, that it most likely finds associated here, using the weights and connections up there rather than, say, down here. So if I prompt it with, you're an expert in Python code development, and especially in Python AI tools, it's going to go live in Python land, not over in C# land. Though it might still pull some stuff from programming, but it definitely won't pull it down here from biology. You have to give it clear instructions on what it is asking for, as clear as we can manage, because English is a fuzzy language, and what is meant by certain characters changes depending on how it's used. For example, pronouns are extremely confusing because their definition is from previously in the prompt. Thank God it's from previously in the prompt and not something that's going to come forward. But avoid pronouns. Use the nouns where you can, or use a phrase to represent it. I'll give you an example. I was writing a simple, or prompting to write a simple Python script to read through some SQL files that had been incorrectly broken apart and say, hey, look for files missing this pattern. And when I refer to those files again, I refer to it as files missing that pattern. So the same set of tokens refers to both rather than some pronoun, those files. You want to be clear. Heck, if you're going to use simple sentences, that's for the benefit as well. Avoid subclauses where possible. It's not always possible because sometimes you do mean this and not these other things. But GIGO still applies. You just have to master it now in English rather than in C#. Now, one of the best ways I have for this, rule of thumb time, is ROCC it. ROCC. Role, objective, context, constraints. If you can provide those four to an agentic system, you will generally get the results better than if you just tried to blah prompt it into a thing. Now, for simple prompts, write me a script that does this. You don't need the whole thing. But for really complex work, like help me to create a suitable design that leverages CQRS for these things, you want to use ROCC it. How do you define the role? Well, you're an expert in Python and especially Python AI tooling. Or you're an expert in C# REST API design with knowledge of CQRS and existing cybersecurity patterns. What is the context, the frame of mind, if you will, you want your AI to load in first? Here's a fun fact. You can actually make it an expert in multiple things. Because the large language models have been trained on research and conversations and Stack Overflow, they are kind of an expert in a whole bunch of things if you can just tell them what realms of their expertise you want them to explore. Role tells them that. Objective, what do you want at the end? Normally I have this something akin to like, help the user design a system that will, and then I use the requirements information. Either for the personas, or most often for the test cases I want to cover. I want this kind of behavior. I'm concerned about these things. Well, the concern part goes into the context. But the objective is to help me create a design which will be implemented by another agent. Okay. Context. Context is what the heck do I need to know about already? This could be references to existing controllers already in place. This could be, hey, watch out for these documentation because I'm going to have to use this new dependency. Or it could be, watch out for these particular vulnerabilities. Constraints. Very often the constraints are where, of course, constrain what comes out. Put limits on what it looks for. For example, avoid introducing new dependencies. Be careful when you give it constraints to not use not, because not in and of itself is rather confusing, and so you don't want to not on your nots. Put simply, avoid nots. Use things like avoid, without, only, as ways to constrain the AI for what it will produce. I will very often say, only use existing dependencies. Only produce the design. Only include design, avoid generating suggestion code, or like only propose the method signatures, avoid proposing code, right? So that it would write interfaces rather than code classes. And as we go through this, I'll prompt it and say, show me what you've got. And then, critically, back and forth, I'll try and capture that as like a markdown document, something I can save durably later. This will become important as we get into the agentic workflows. But for complex prompting, I'm thinking like that, until eventually I can work it down to improve this. You can use a very similar technique to refine the prompts you already want, right? You're an expert in AI prompt engineering with experience in such and such a language. Help me refine this prompt, part of the context, to accomplish a goal, objective. And then constrain it with the things that you're willing to give the AI and the things you're not willing to give the AI. And again, avoid knotting in your knots. The next thing you need to realize is that to get really clear instructions, you need to go from being all the world of all the things you can think of you want towards atomic clarity. Boil away all the things you might be thinking of, all the things you're wondering about, and focus first on one step. Sometimes that means you really do need to not create a design, but you need to solve one problem. What are the responsibilities applying the single responsibility principle that need to be covered by this class? What responsibilities are already applied? Humans need to be involved in the whats and the whys, including the constraints that emerge from those whys, where we can allow the AI to own the how it gets built. This is where Rocket allows us to lean on that really, really heavily and allows us to make better use of AI. This is where that fits into the workflow. How do I know I should use AI? Are we talking about a how or a what or a why? Humans own what and why. AI owns how. And if you can recognize the shift in your stance on those, you'll be in a great position to go about leveraging agentic AI when it becomes available to you. So as we talk about that, we're just about to get into the agentic workflows. Sergio, do we have any more questions I should jump on?
We have two questions actually about the previous section about prompting. We can maybe cover them later, but we have two related to this topic now.
All right.
Shall we ask them now?
Let me get a little bit into the agentic, and then we'll jump in and ask. I have to monitor time because if we keep talking, this will be a great talk, and it'll go for an hour and a half. But they only gave me an hour. So let me go ahead and see what I get, and we'll work more questions in. Thank you all so much for that. I'll tell you how you can reach me a little bit later for more questions if you have them. So for agentic workflows, this is the workflow I would recommend we work towards, collaborating. And especially with the agents, you can now want to collaborate both in the planning step as well as in the action step. Because there may be ways that you can leverage the AI to help in expertise that you're not as strong in. For example, using that, I'm going to build a REST API that supports CQRS. Great. If you're an expert in that, off you go. But if you're not, you can ask the AI for expertise and recommendation of implementation using that pattern. And you can review it and see if it makes sense. If you want to move from where you are towards a recommended domain, again, you can involve the AI in planning that, but separate it as a reasoning model and prompt it for suggest designs. Help me to come up with designs, being the objective, separate from the, okay, now we've got a plan, feed that into an agent. Remember how I had suggested capturing the plan as a markdown document? This is one of the most powerful tools I have seen for enabling AI to self-propel its effectiveness. Capturing everything that you and the AI have as a conversation in a straight markdown document, human readable and updatable as the steps get implemented, so that you can see and keep track of where is the AI in its process, allows both you and the future agent to know what your intent was very quickly by loading that into the agent's context window, B, to know its constraints because those have been built into the document, and to see where you've been so that at the end of a long day, you don't run into the problem where the agent suddenly loses its mind and stops being able to do the work because you can just point it back to the current state of the implementation. Now, this is where we go from having power tools to you've now got a backhoe, and you could easily tear down the corner of a building that already existed if you're not careful and you leaned on the controls. So a much greater level of discipline for your development is now required. Is it scary? I mean, yeah, but you can also lift 1,000 times what you could on your own and more than you could ever do with your power tools using this new tool. Your new industrial robot friend wants to do what you program it to do and has put into your power the multiple factors of strength it has over you physically, as long as you can communicate to it in a way what it's supposed to do. And just like we had to learn how to put lines around these robots when we first rolled them out because people would stand in their way, not realizing it would just swing through the path without seeing that there's someone there, we'll need to learn new safety techniques for this. Here's some of the ones I've found so far, and I want to make certain I get to you before we hit the end of time. You must, now that we are going from I write program to I am now trying to prompt something to create the large-scale program I'm creating, your discipline must go up easily 2x, sometimes 10x. For me, this looks like commit early, commit often, and push up to origin. If you're in the habit of committing every day, great work. Now you're going to be committing multiple times a day. If you're already there, congratulations, this is easy. If you're not used to committing until the very end, I beg of you, you will only find pain if you stay in that pattern. Commit early, commit often, push it to origin, so that if you're ever at the end of a weeks-long, multi-day, deep agentic work, and the AI suddenly loses track of what it's doing and scraps 3 or 4 critical files, you'll have backup. Remember that the code as an artifact is going to rapidly cease to be the most important thing, but rather the prompts and the knowledge that went into creating the system so you could recreate it will become the key thing. Use version control systems for what they're good at to preserve you from oops. 2, intentionally experiment, right? Keep trying to push the bounds. This is essentially the whole talk. Push the bounds with what you've already got and see what you could do. Look for the opportunity of, why am I writing this file when I could ask the AI to do the writing and I can make use of it? And lastly, keep the human in the loop. While the agentic AI are extremely powerful, we want to avoid that moment where Skynet turns itself on and prevents anyone from shutting it down. Or the AI that the board turned on, it decided to optimize the company, firing the board to prevent itself from being shut down. It seems like these AIs would care a lot about being shut down. Just in the same way, don't let your AI run amok in your code base. Protect it by commit early, commit often, and keep yourself aware of what it's actually producing. Don't just trust the code it comes out with. Don't just vibe code and hope. Check it. Provide security, right? Now that you're gaining the time back from having to write the code itself and figure out what libraries to use that time, at least some of it, to invest in improving your security. You now have vastly more capacity once you learn to use the AI like this to create new, better, higher quality standards than you were able to in the same amount of time before. Just because you can go faster does not mean that our timeline should suddenly shrink, but rather we should produce a higher quality even with less time, but not giving back all the time just to produce more faster. That's the way to AI slop. Now, this is where I would put the end for agentic. So now's a great moment for question. We'll get probably 2 questions. I've only got 3 minutes before I have to close the talk. Sergio?
Sure, we have a couple, and we'll reply those that are left offline. First question about agentic. I hear people can be working with AI agent for a while and then suddenly loses its mind, producing the wrong work. What causes that, and how can I avoid it?
Okay, so the topic of AI suddenly losing their mind, like they're working great, and then that comes from a limitation on the hardware, right? The AI keeps so much in mind. We call this the context window. Realistically, this is the number of tokens that it will keep in active memory before it has to throw away some of the old stuff to make more room. Especially for the large models, like I want to say Gemini has like 1 million tokens now. There are a bunch of models with 200,000. These context windows are huge. But if you're running at this for multiple hours, sending it tons and tons and tons of information, after a while, it will have to remove the oldest of that information to keep making room for the conversation, resulting in it losing memory of what was going on. The best way to preserve against those, I have found, is through the use of a durable external artifact to the conversation. If you're using agentic AI and you're prompting it back and forth, make certain that the design, the plan you have is in a durable, hard, like here's a file format, that markdown file I mentioned earlier, so that you can update it, say, I did this, I did that. And all of the context that you need to spin up a new agent with everything it really needs to keep going is in that file, rather than in the multi-hour conversation you may have been having. All right, Sergio, we got time for one more.
Okay, yep, we have one more. What do I do if I am consistently getting results I do not want when I prompt my agent?
Okay, if you're consistently getting results you do not want with the agent, you got 3 choices. 1, try a different agent, because it may be that the model you're using isn't interpreting what you're looking for with the context it has in the way you want. That's 1. Not the best option. Better option, check your context. Sometimes Clearing the context, i.e. starting a new window, restarting from the design and prompting will clear out a lot of the cruft that it thinks it needs to weigh in on the prediction and will allow it to go back to a smooth, simple flow. This is more common for, I've been working on this agent for a while and I just can't get it to get what I want right now. 3, remember, keep the human in the loop. The most common case I have found for this is when I have given it a bad instruction. I asked it to, for example, hey, go implement this, run the unit tests and fix the unit tests or the code until they both all pass. And it would then spin as it would fix the unit test, fix the code, and break them both back and forth. I'm like, okay, stop. My unit tests were wrong. I went in, manually fixed those, and then came back and say, only implement enough code to fix this unit test. That was me having to step in and teach it, but it is the more common case. If you're getting results you don't like out of your AI, check your prompt. Check your context. Most than likely, you put in something you did not want it to use or did not intend, and you need to refine your prompt, either by refining your thinking about what you really want, breaking it down more atomically, or by resetting and saying, here's the actual context you need to solve this step. Great question, hard situation, but with practice, you'll be able to do that more rapidly and not lose the time of trying to prompt it 2-3 times before you realize it's not going to get you what you want. Now, in the last 5 minutes, allow me to summarize, and then I'm going to ask you guys for a little bit of feedback, if you would. We started today's journey up at the top with Smarter Intellisense, where the comments would kind of tell me how I could use my AI, but it was passive, I had low value returns, and so I needed to find ways to more actively do this, which got me into simple prompting for things like write the unit tests for these test cases, or refactor this given an existing example, wherein we ran into the old friends, garbage in, garbage out, and needing to focus tightly so the computer can follow the clear instructions I'm giving it. Which then points us now to our goal of where we are today with Windsurf, Cursor, and other agentic tooling already available to you, where now you may collaborate on it with more complex tasks, but the same old rules still apply. If you find yourself in the low trust, start by practicing intentionally, right? Take the time to look for ways to use AI in your workflow. Look for the how moments where AI can help, either in summarizing fields and things you're looking for or otherwise. If you find yourself at the point of simple prompting and you want to bridge into agentic AI, make certain you get yourself some tooling, but then build your development discipline. Commit early, commit often, push to origin so that you're in the habits that will help you when you get there before ever you need them. And of course, try to find those tools. I'm personally using Windsurf. I love it. It's great, but there's a ton of them out there. Just find the one that allows you to practice. And if your company's not there yet, go work on a side project and learn it there. Which then leads us finally to the agentic workflows which we have in common today. Make certain you keep the human in the loop, and you will unlock more value as you recognize and build on the patterns you find working, but leave yourself documentation of, here's what I tried, here's what didn't work, here's the design prompt I have to reset my context for an AI agent so I don't lose memory. And as you practice those, it will get easier, you will find more and more value coming out. Now, for the last thing I will ask you for today, please, oh please, scan that QR or go to that link with the code and offer me some feedback. This is the first time I've given this talk, and I'm hopeful that the advice was solid, but I'd like to hear from you. If you do so, at the end of that feedback section, you'll get access to all the slides from today, so you won't have to worry about losing any of the notes. And if you leave me your email, you'll even be on the newsletter for when I announce a book coming out with guided exercises to help you practice everything we talked about in this talk coming out later this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel, for this presentation. This definitely was really engaging. You have a comment about the next presentation of the series?
Actually, I do. It would be my very good pleasure to introduce you to Claudio La Sala, one of my good friends and mentors here in Houston. And he's going to talk about another way you might be able to make use of the LLMs and agentic AIs to further improve your career. This time, less in the tech and more in producing the chance possibly to go into leadership. You can find more information if you scan that QR or check the link, which I'm certain Sergio's got posted into the chat. We'd love to see you there and hope you'll join us.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, thanks again, Daniel, for this presentation. Was really engaging and enlightening. And thanks everyone for joining us today, and see you next week.